In this video, we're going to go ahead and cover Photoshop Classroom in a Book Chapter 2, which is all about basic photo corrections. You're going to start in Canvas. Make sure you go ahead and download the assets to your desktop or to your flash drive. Go to your desktop or flash drive, right-click, and extract all to open that. When we look in the folder, we'll see that we've got a end, we've got a TIFF, and there's an extra credit TIFF that we're not going to work with. Alright, so let's go ahead and open up Photoshop and do this a little bit differently. Usually if we're retouching, there's a sequence of events. You want to do things like duplicate your original so that in case there's a problem you have something to go back to. We're going to play with resolution, the cropping, play with color cast, adjust the ranges, see if there's any flaws in the scans, adjust the color, and then we're sharpen the image. Alright, so let's go ahead and start Photoshop and go File, and we're going to go Browse in Bridge. Now, Browse in Bridge allows us to see what's actually in those Photoshop files rather than just have it be the initials of the program. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my desktop, which is where I've got mine saved. And I'm going to go to, as soon as I figure out where I put it, Photoshop Classroom Book Chapter 2, and I can see that I've got my end PSD, my start TIFF, and my bike. Now notice we can actually see this PSD, which we couldn't before in the File Explorer. Down here on the right hand side there is a slider which will allow you to see the images side by side. So you'll notice our beginning image has a crease down the middle. We've got an extra gentleman in here. It's crooked. It's got kind of a funky color cast. We're going to go ahead and fix all of that. So let's go ahead and start with the TIFF. And right click, open with Photoshop. And it's going to open up that document for us. First thing we're going to do is do File, Save As. Make sure it's in our folder. And instead of O2 Start TIFF, we're going to do O2 Working. And we don't want it to be a TIFF, we want it to be a PSD, a Photoshop document. So we're going to hit the down arrow and hit Photoshop Document and put OK. Now the very first thing I'm going to do is make a copy of this background layer, so in case something happens I have something to go back to. I can right click, duplicate layer, background copy's fine, say OK, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the eyeball off. That way I know I have something to go back to just in case something happens. Alright, so what are the things we need to do? One of the first things we need to do is crop and straighten this image. So we're going to go ahead and head over to the left hand side to our tools panel and get the crop tool. In the crop tool we want to go ahead and choose, instead of ratio, we want W by H by resolution. So width times height times resolution. And we want to make this first number 7 inches. We want to make this second number 7 inches. And we want to make the resolution 200. Now when we're doing things for our class, anything that we're doing for print, we're going to go ahead and make 300, so it's super high resolution. And this is one of the ways you can go ahead and do that. We get what's called the crop shield, so you can kind of see our rule of thirds here in the corners. So we could go ahead and crop it, but if we crop it right now, it's crooked and it's not going to work very well. So we're going to do something else first. We're going to go ahead and hit this straighten icon right here, which gives us a little level. We're actually going to draw a line, click and hold all the way across what is crooked, because we're saying this is the crooked line. And as soon as we let go, notice it automatically straightened it out. If you don't like it, you can always straighten it again. Maybe you didn't get it quite on the way you wanted to. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and crop off part of this white stuff. So I can grab my handles and notice how it's cropping with proportion, because we've told it what size we want it to be in the end. So you can always use your mouse and kind of nudge it around until you get what you want. Then when you're happy with what's going to crop off, anything that's in the light gray is going to be deleted. That's why it says delete up here. And we're going to go ahead and push check or enter. And now we have our document. If we go down here to the bottom and you go to document dimensions, it'll show you right here that we have a 7 by 7 inch document that is 200 pixels, which is exactly what we had told it to do when we cropped it. All right, let's go ahead and do a Control S and save it. All right, one of the first things we're going to do is adjust the color and the tone, because right now you can see it's kind of green and we don't want it to be. I'm going to do a Control Plus so we can see a little bit more. We're going to play with our adjustments layers, and we're going to go ahead and go over here to adjustments. One of the first things we're going to do is play with curves. Curves is the one that looks like an S on a graph. And with curves, we're going to go ahead and tell it what is actually should be white. So we're going to grab this third dropper down so we can set a white point. And I'm going to do Control Plus so you can see a little bit more. And I'm going to click on what should be considered white in this image. So I can do her dress. That's not bad. If I want to, I could say, okay, the sock is what's really white. Or the little sailor dress. You can always undo. So I think that's okay. And it does a lot better, but we can play with it a little bit more. So we moved that it's not as green as it was before. So let's add another adjustment. And let's go to levels. And we can adjust the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. This is shadows, this is midtones, and this is highlights right over here. So we're going to go ahead and set our first one right here to 15. And notice how it got a little bit darker. We're going to set the second one to 0.9. And we're going to leave our endpoint at 255. So you see just those few little changes, just a little bit of a nudge, and you get those corrections in your color that are relatively easy. And we're going to say, okay, now we want to go ahead and flatten these three things. So we're working with one copy. I'm going to shift click levels 1. I'm going to shift and hit background copy so that I get all three of those selected in my levels or in my layers panel. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say merge layers. Now I did that so that I wouldn't accidentally merge it into my background, which we made a copy of in the back. So it's a little bit different than the book, but that's what we're going to work on. Alright, so what's some of the next things we need to fix? We've got this big crease right here down the middle that we really don't want. So we're going to use the spot healing tool. The spot healing tool is about a third of the way down. It looks like a band-aid with a circle. This is an awesome tool. It's great for removing blemishes. So I'm going to go ahead and Control Plus in the sky so I can see what I'm doing. I like to do the spot healing tool in small doses. You're just basically clicking and dragging down. Click, drag down. I generally like to do it in, especially when I know I'm changing colors, I do those as separate bits and see how easily this is creating that cleanup for us. Now I used a 25-point brush that was really hard, 100%, and I made sure my content aware was on. Content aware means I want you to pay attention to what pixels are around it and correct from there. Alright, I've also got this hair over here. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight over my hair and get rid of that. Then I can also go through, clean up any other dots, things that, imperfections that I don't want. Sometimes you'll find you're trying to clean up something which is actually a spot on your monitor, not a spot in the picture, which will drive you a little crazy. All right, I'm going to do Control minus, and that looks pretty clean. So one of the next things we want to do is get rid of this gentleman right here. We decide we do not want to have him. So we're going to use what's called the ContentAware Patch. So in our Tools panel, underneath our Spot Healing, hold the triangle, you're going to get the Patch tool. I'm going to zoom in, Control Plus, so I can see him a little bit better. And I need to go ahead and click and hold and draw a circle around this guy. You want to do it relatively close, and you do want to go ahead and grab the shadows till you get all the way around and close it, and you get your dancing ants that we talked about last time. Alright, so what are we going to do now? We need to make him go away. In order to do that, we're just going to make sure our patch is content aware. Instead of normal, we want content aware. We want our structure to be 4, which means just how close or loose do you want us to be when we make the change. Now I'm going to take my mouse, grab my gentleman, and notice as I drag to the left, he disappears, and he is replaced with whatever is the new patch is covering. Notice you'll want to pay attention to making sure your wall lines up, otherwise it's going to patch really crooked, which is a little bit weird. So I'm going to go ahead, and when I'm happy with it, I let go. And notice how now I can do Control D, and he is completely gone. Now he's got a little bit of his shadow left. I could have done him a little bit wider, but for our purposes, it's okay. I'm going to do Control S to save what we have so far. Alright, so now one of the next things we want to do is repair with the clone stamp tool, because clearly right here we don't want to have that same problem that shows that we've actually done something like tried to patch it. So we're going to use the clone stamp. The clone stamp's about halfway down. We want to go ahead with our clone stamp, and under our brush, let's go ahead and choose a 60 pixel brush. And let's go ahead and make it a 30% hardness. You can either put the numbers in or you can use the sliders. Alright, so for the clone stamp to work, we have to tell it a point that we're going to reference from. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt, and I'm going to get a different type of cursor, which means this is where I want you to start sampling from. I can now click and hold. Oh, we didn't click it, we didn't define it. So now I click and hold, and it's the same mathematically from where it started. So I can have a new point, Control click. And so now it's not quite as obvious that I've got the same errors that I had from before. So it's a really easy way to get rid of unwanted things. I could go ahead, Alt click, and kind of cover up that dark spot in here. That's a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my move tool. So you can do that to clean up any type of the wall. Totally up to you. You probably would want to go through and remove part of this line so it's not exactly the same. Let's go ahead and go back to our clone stamp. And let's go ahead and grab up here. Kind of just go over top of it. So now it looks like we've got a new line down there. Not perfect, but for our purposes of showing you how the clone stamp works, it is good enough. Alright, I'm switching back to my move tool. Let's go ahead and Control S and save as we go. Alright, so one of the next things we want to do is to sharpen the image. Let's go ahead and Control plus or grab your zoom tool and zoom in. Mine's on minus, so it's zooming out. I want plus. Let's go ahead and zoom in by his shirt up till about 400%. Now you notice that we get all of these little JPEG artifacts, which we don't want. It happened when we were scanning the picture. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to go up to Filter, come down to Noise, and we want the one that says Dust and Scratches. And it's going to say, okay, what do you want us to do? We are going to go ahead and leave it at the default, the radius 1 and the threshold 0, and notice that all those little tiny colored dots are now gone. So we're getting better. Let's go ahead and do Filter, Sharpen, and Smart Sharpen, which is down just a little bit further. And we get all these different items that we can go ahead and play with. we want to go ahead and remove what's called a lens blur. It's not because we're removing it, it's not because it's just generally blurry. It's a lens blur that we want to fix. And we want to go ahead and fix it to about 60% with a radius of 1.5. So it's going to make it just a little bit more clear. I'm going to say OK. Okay, I'm going to Control minus, back out to my 100%. And within about 5 minutes or so, we just completely changed the look and feel of this picture and restored it. So you could spend more time cleaning up these lines. You could crop it in more as a way to deal with part of that issue as well. So it's totally up to you as to when is it enough. So I'm going to say escape. I'm going to go ahead and push File Save. And for this assignment, you're going to upload the PSD document, the working.psd, to Canvas. You do not need to submit a packaged file. That's all for this one.